The global HIV response is experiencing an unprecedented funding crisis, compounded by human rights and humanitarian challenges. HIV programs across the world are struggling from the sudden major reductions in funding for the global HIV response announced by the United States government and declining resources from other donor governments over a number of years. PEPFAR had committed $4.3 billion to support over 50 countries with their HIV response in 2025. Well, those services were stopped overnight as the US government decided to reconsider their foreign assistance strategies. But South Africa says it has had to move fast to relook its approach.
We are fortunate in the sense that from a funding perspective, the government actually funds the HIV treatment response to the tune of 77%. So even with the funding crisis that we have seen, South Africa is lauded for actually bearing, from a national fiscus perspective, the bulk of the HIV treatment component.
Well, this is where South Africa stands in terms of HIV infections versus the entire globe. You'd know that international assistance accounts for 80% of prevention programs, in particular in low and middle income countries. UNAIDS's modeling shows that, if the funding is permanently disappearing or disappears permanently, there could be an additional 6 million HIV infections and an additional 4 million AIDS-related deaths by 2029.
This is a serious disruption, but we also see that countries, governments, and civil society are not lying down and waiting to die, that there is action, that there is transformation. We also see that the impact of this disruption, that the disruption itself is not just financial. We also see that there is a backlash against rights, laws, policies that create that enabling environment for people to come forward and get life-saving services. This is happening across the world. We see for the first time we started compiling these reports, for the first time, the number of countries that criminalize same-sex relations or gender expression have increased for the first time. So we see that punitive laws, punitive enforcement of criminal laws is increasing. So we see that people who should come forward for services are also not coming forward because of this backlash on rights. So, as I said, we have the power to transform, and we are seeing efforts by governments, by communities to move forward and plug this hole. We sampled countries. We found out of 60 countries, 25 were talking about or planning reallocations. Some have created new sources of domestic funding like levies and so on to push forward to fill their gap.
I want to regard this moment as a wake-up call. A wake-up call. Because whether we like it or not, it is the responsibility of every government to provide for its people. It's not the responsibility of other governments. I understand the issue of solidarity, but every government on this planet has got a responsibility to provide for its people. That's where it must start, which means there must be very clear political will. Because I agree with Mama Winnie here, that this type of relationship where we depend on one country, and when the country is in some negative mood, the whole world collapses. Yes, it's scary. In fact, I was asking myself, how did we arrive here, where all of us depend on one country? Yes, because when this announcement was made, I was boasting to my cabinet that, no, don't worry, we're buying our own ARVs to the tune of 90%, which is good. I said the other 10% is funded by Global Fund, which is true. And I said, that is not touched by PEPFAR. And I was proudly saying that. Only to discover that 1/3 of PEPFAR funding, of global funding, is from PEPFAR. And I was, here was I. No, don't worry, Global Fund is still with us 10%. Then Global Fund said, by the way, and I was asking myself how we arrived there. Now we've received a letter from Global Fund that because PEPFAR is pulled out, part of the 10 billion rand which we're getting over 3 years, about 1.4 billion will no longer come. What do we do, as Reverend Diaz has said? Roll out and die? No, we can't allow that. We can't allow that. That's why we've been working around the clock.
Crisalda Lewis, SABC News in Johannesburg.